All right, welcome to Storycomic Presents, where we interview amazing storytellers and artists. This is episode 42. We're talking with Banana Chan. Banana Chan is a role-playing game designer, as well as the owner of her own publishing company, Game and a Curry, with her partner Herb. Her expertise extends to both tabletop and live-action role-playing. Banana has written for tabletop role-playing games such as Kid on Bikes and Jiangshi, and a multitude of other stories and collections. And Banana, so excited to have you here. I know we talked, you were supposed to be on here about a month or so ago, but then I over planned the fact that it was less than a week after we had a baby.
Congratulations.
My wife and I, thank you. And then I realized that like there is no way I'm going to be able to do this interview with Banana. Can we move it? She's like, yeah, sure. So I'm very happy that you're being flexible.
Oh, it's totally fine. I am almost like always in front of a computer now.
Yeah. And you're gotten so much stuff. You got so many things going on right now. You have, and we'll talk about this. You got project after project. Like you are like deftly like just managing like a multitude of projects, board games and tabletop role-playing games, and we'll get into some of those in a little bit. But first, for some of the listeners and viewers out there that might not be familiar with your work and with your company, do you want to give people kind of a quick background on how you created this place and how you got started?
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks for having me on, first of all. I guess, so I first started doing game stuff, like getting into the industry itself, I guess, was sometime in 2013 when Herb and I started writing blogs, writing, about games and the restaurants that we would go to for Game and a Curry, hence the name Game and a Curry. So we would write about, the places that we would go to, pair it together with like a game. And that's something that we were doing for a while. Eventually, Herb started making buttons for different companies that we were friends with, and I started making videos for them as well. So I would make promotional videos, Kickstarter videos, that kind of thing, for companies such as Bully Pulpit or Ad Magic / Breaking Games. And then from there, I started, I guess, like meeting a whole bunch of different people, right? So on the board game end of things, I met like, Doug and all these other people like Brian Neff, all of them. And then on the role-playing game side of things, I met a whole lot of LARPers, like I met a whole bunch of like people who are into LARP, weird one-shot type of LARPs, and role-playing games and very experimental things, right? So it reminded me a lot of like the weird stuff that I was doing in art school. So I think that's how I got into it. So I met Jason Morningstar, I met Avery Alder, I met Ajit George, Strix, all those people. And I sort of like, got my feet into tabletop role-playing games from there and just like playing these, indie games in general. So like, I guess like the first game that I got really immersed into was Monster Hearts. And then after that, it was like Juggernaut and, all these other games. And from there, I discovered the Golden Cobra Awards, which was the Golden Cobra Challenge, which was a challenge that my friends put together. And so I was like, hey, why don't I do something for this? So I wrote a game. I made my first game and sent it over to them. I got an honorable mention. And that game was The Other Place, which was inspired by the outsider artist Henry Darger. And so...
Okay.
That was the first game that I did. I made like all these drawings and watercolors and everything for it. And then after that, the second year, I submitted another game called They're Onto Me, which is a solo vlogging game. So it's sort of like solo journaling RPGs, but this is like you're vlogging yourself, and it's optional if you want to like post it onto social media or YouTube or whatever. But that won Best Pervasive LARP for that year. And I believe we're in now we're in 2017, somewhere around there.
Yeah, they're on to me. It was 2016. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thank you. You know this better than I do. I just like get all the years mixed up. And then after that, I guess I started writing for like small publications. So I wrote a small game for a zine. I wrote a module for Kids on Bikes. I wrote something for North Sea Epilogues, like modules here and there, just like guest writing where I could. And then eventually it somehow ramped up into writing for Warp's Edge and writing for Terror Below. And then, somehow I started developing my own tabletop RPG with Senfeng Lim, which is Jiangshi in the Banquet Hall.
Okay.
So it's a lot of stuff.
That's a lot of stuff.
We could go through. We could zoom into whichever one of those portions you wanna go through.
Well, yeah. Usually when I interview people, they have like a book, or they're talking about like one project where you have plenty. They have like it's like so. But so I wanted to kind of ask you a bit, just putting on the game in a curry, the business sense. Now, so it was around that time, 2013 is when you kind of you and your partner started the LLC, and as you say, kind of like helping out people doing Kickstarters, and you're helping pick promotional things. And what was the point where was it a slow progression, or was there an actual conversation that the two of you sat down and said, we need to start writing our own stuff? I mean, how did that happen? What you kind of mentioned earlier, you seem to though and a lot of people talk about success as, persistence and being in the right place at the right time. And how much of you going towards the publishing and writing piece to it was deliberate, and how much of it was just it kind of naturally progressed in that direction?
I think a little bit of both, honestly. So I think when it came to the publishing side of things, we were working with so many different companies anyway at that time. We wanted to do something, with our friends. So our first game, Diamonds, was published in 2017, somewhere around there. And that was by Dave Beaver and Brian Soriano. And it was a kids game, and we were just like, let's try this, let's do this, and let's see what happens. I think after that, we were like, okay, this is like an official thing. Let's make it happen. We have, a little bit of funding, and we know, the people in the industry already. So why not, utilize the stuff that we know, stuff that we've learned from 2013 onwards, and try to utilize that and help our friends publish their game. So that was the first thing that we did. And then after that, and this is just like the board game publishing side of things, we started doing Judge Dredd Block War, which was a game that Herb had been working on for about like 5 years. And eventually I was just like, let's try and get the IP. Let's see what happens. The worst thing that could happen was them saying no to us. So we hired a lawyer, and they talked to Rebellion, and we got a yes back. So that was great. And so we just like went forward with it. And so we went ahead, published that game. And I think in terms of like my own writing, that sort of happened separately, but also tangentially at the same time, just because I was getting, to know all these people in the industry, and I was like, practicing writing and like getting into like, I guess more of like the LARPy side of things / the RPG side of things, and discovering that community really pushed me forward in doing more of this kind of stuff.
And so do you feel as though now, as evolving Game in a Curry from supporting gaming companies and studios to now being also a publishing studio, how much did you see that there is either a lot of collaboration, or or is there a lot of competition or camaraderie that happens within? because we talked before earlier, the sandbox is pretty small once you know people.
Mm-hmm.
What was the response that you've seen from your peers from other studios?
I think initially when we're talking about like these sort of very small niche games, like you were saying, the sandbox is very small. So it does become a little bit of like, I'm supporting this person and they're going to support me back eventually. And, it's the same. We have this joke where it's like the same, $25, $50 that was just like passed around between all of us over and over again, which in a way is true. But at the same time, I think that when I started, getting into the industry, it felt a little bit like that. But now that we're moving into like, a different sort of space, people are more hungry for different kinds of games. It's reaching a larger audience right now, especially with with the quarantine. People are looking for different board games, different role-playing experiences, that kind of thing. So we are tapping into markets that we probably didn't really think about before, and now people are excited for these niche games because there's so much time on our hands now.
Well, yeah, I'll just segue into this. This was going to be a question I was going to ask you near the end of the interview. So let me ask you this, because this seems like an appropriate time to ask you. Where do you see the future of tabletop games and board games? As we've seen a lot of these, quote unquote, as they were considered in the 80s, the nerd culture stuff, where it was, you've seen like science fiction, like Star Trek and Star Wars have become mainstream. Superheroes comics has now kind of merged mainstream, not so much comic books itself, but that is, where do you see the future of board games? As you say, not the major big ones that everybody knows, but like, where do you see the future of board games and tabletop role-playing games?
I think that there is still this, I wouldn't call it a stigma, but there still is this mentality that people think or consider gaming or games in general as like a kid thing to do, right? Even though like the community at large is like, we're all adults, we really enjoy playing games. But I think that's slowly breaking down. Like, I think that a lot of financial companies are now hiring game designers, which might sound strange, but a lot of it is for like different workshops that they're doing. So I think that a lot of bigger companies are understanding, especially consulting companies, are understanding now that there is value in play. There is value in trying to step into the shoes of like another person, so that therefore you can go along their journey and find out what they want to buy or something like that, right? So I'm speaking about this from experience because I know like a lot of companies are doing this right now. Like a project that I did a while ago was for UNICEF, and that was myself and Allison Cole. We developed a large game, so it was for like 100 or so people. And it was for DevCon, and we basically made like sort of a mini escape room for like multiple people. And I think that because people are now discovering that like play is really important for us to think and quote unquote outside the box, I think that now they're starting to understand that, hey, they're called games, but they're actually for different things. This is just like a vehicle for like something else, right? This is just a vehicle for you to understand other people and hopefully learn, user behavior or like customer behavior. So I think that there's that segment of it. I think that also in terms of like role-playing games in general, obviously like the big one is D&D, but a lot of people are now starting to see that role-playing games aren't necessarily tied to just the fantasy genre. I think that people are now starting to see that there are different genres that can be attached to different mechanics. And for role-playing games specifically, you're seeing that like it's this sort of shift in mindset where it's not just like, fantasy plus mechanics equals role-playing game. It's now mechanics can be a vehicle for storytelling, and that story can be anything. It could be any genre. It could take on any form. Sort of like how movies are, you have different genres of movie and you have different genres of books, right? So it's just a medium. And I think people are now starting to like play with it more and get more experimental and taking it into like a digital space and, doing the post by text type thing and trying to like experiment and do different things.
And I'm also too, it's also too, I'm wondering as you brought up too, there's a generational aspect to it where stereotypically speaking, Gen X and millennials were raised on collaboration. Like we were able to do that. And I'm wondering if this is that we're starting to see this, as you say, kind of like a new birth of board games and this kind of going into the mainstream, because it kind of fits within our culture because there's two things that mainly like games will teach you. It's strategy in a fun way, but it also teaches you some level of empathy that it allows you to kind of put yourself, especially role-playing games, that put yourselves in somebody else's shoes. And as you say, you see a lot of that, of these Fortune 500 HR departments are like, like you say, let's create an experience where we can all kind of feel something that, it's.
Yeah, I think, a few of them have probably been to like one too many escape rooms. And so they're just like, I want to do this at my job, which I've seen a lot of people do. And sometimes it is really successful, like especially this thing called customer journey mapping. Like a lot of companies are doing that. And trying to implement like role-playing tools and like adding that into customer journey mapping. So there is a market for that. Like if you want to, try and make money and try and like get into, these different financial companies or like, finance companies or consulting firms, then yes, there is a way to, get into it. But I think that in terms of like the general public, like not our niche group, I feel like people still sort of think of games as like a hobby or like a small thing that you do with your kids. But it's slowly changing. Absolutely.
Yeah. There's like, as you're talking, I'm reminded of the stereotype of like, you have the family games and then you have the intelligentsia. I guess it's it's like, get your Trivial Pursuit. So it's like almost every house has a Trivial Pursuit game and a Hungry Hippos. Like there's just like, it's like, there's one that's, it's like you say, games are just for kids or it's for, it's for, people like, well, I this is way too, when also too, it's like how, and I guess, how do you market so many niche games to the senses that a lot of the games that people will pick up are games they already know the rules to. And there's something that could be also daunting in the sense of having rarely do you find a game where it just says the rules are just on one page and it's that big. And I think, so do you feel that as somebody that designs games, both tabletop role-playing games is a completely different beast in this sense, but as a board game, how, when you collaborate or you help design or do that, when you beta test it or alpha test it, do you say, this is too complicated? So my question is, it's like, well, what's your question? So I guess the question is how often do you sit down at the beginning of the talks of a game, and how different does it look to the end product that you either crowdsource or produce?
It can be very different. So I want to stress that your initial idea or your initial product might look very different from what the end result will be. So I think that a lot of the time when we're designing, and this is something that I came head to head, with in the beginning when I was first designing, where, the thing that you make first, like that initial thing, is your baby, and like you can't do anything with it. You can't change it. And if people give you feedback, they're just like, whatever, just don't listen to them, that kind of thing. I think that we are very precious with our games in the beginning, but after a while, and this probably comes with experience, but like after a while, I realized that it's good to have like yourself in the game. It's great to make it personal, but at the same time, when it comes to user feedback and user testing, I think that is what's more important, because if you're trying to relay your message, like if it's like a personal message, it makes more sense for you to just like relay it certain ways so that people understand what you're trying to do. And I think that a lot of games, board games especially, they're shifting over to trying to make things more accessible. So accessibility is a big thing right now. And, not that like worker placements and like, those kinds of games can't be accessible. They can be. It's just a matter of like making sure that everything is clear on the rule sheet, which I've always had like issues with in the past. So writing rules is very difficult. So like, if you're first starting out and like you're writing rules and it seems really hard, it's just like a hard thing to do, which is why you have so many collaborators and so many people to like work with you and to make passes of the game with you before you show it to other people.
And so and where do you see as well is that you see the market mostly towards, because there's so many different types of genres or types of board games. Is it mostly, you say, like card building, or is it the larger games? I remember you mentioned in a previous interview is that during the beginning of your the career of Game and a Curry, you played at a table. Usually Panera always had the larger tables that you could play at. So do you see that kind of a reflection of the general population of, let's make it more compact? Bigger games don't sell as well because they're more expensive. So where do you see a lot of the direction going towards, and creating more mainstream board games like that?
I think in terms of the mainstream market, they're a little different because they want things to be easy to learn, first of all, not too many rules, nothing too hard to understand. If you're pitching to somewhere like Ravensburger or like, another company that goes to mass market easily, then I think the way to go is to try to make things as simple as possible, because not everyone is going to have the level of understanding or the level of player experience as people like us within the industry who have played a lot of games. But that's not to say that games like that can't be fun. They can be fun. They can be a lot of fun. And they can, drive up like a really great experience among players. It's just that if you're targeting towards like a mass market audience, then it's probably better to think of things as like a more simple way of packaging everything together. I think that if you are looking towards like more niche audiences, it's okay to like have a weird theme. It's okay to have like a weird mechanic if you wanted to. I think it really depends on what the target audience is, and I think it really depends on like what the end result that you're trying to make is going to be. So I think pre-planning a little bit of that is important too. Obviously, it could change over time. Like maybe you initially wanted it to be like a really indie thing, and then oops, it eventually turned into like this mass market thing, or it might suit a mass market audience better. That's okay too. It's sort of like this weird evolution that you kind of grow with.
Right. And I mean, and that's the thing too, is just like for those that are listening, like the board game industry is huge. If you go on Board Game Geek, there's like over 20,000 games. Like it's almost, it's almost the point that if for anyone that wants to have a game, you can find a game that is the perfect fit for you. You go, check out, I mean, like your friendly local game store, the people behind the counter will say, this is what, if you're looking for this, and 9 times out of 10 is probably going to be a Game and a Curry game too, probably, right?
I don't know. I wouldn't say it's a Game and a Curry game. It's probably a game that I've like touched at one point in terms of like, the people that I work with. It's probably like a 7 degrees of separation type of thing, right?
So talk to us a bit also then is that your passion, your beginning passion, as you said, from art school, and then you went into the LARPing world. So can you give people just a quick summary of what live action role playing consists of?
Yeah. So there are many different types of LARP. So what people usually think of when they think of LARPing is boffer LARPing, and sometimes campaign LARPing. So boffer LARPing is like the foam swords. You're like, using your fireballs, that kind of thing. And it has a lot of combat. So it has like a point system with like, sometimes it has points and it sometimes has like combat, but not necessarily all the time. So I want to stress that. And it usually takes on a fantasy sort of setting, or if it's like Dystopia Rising, it's more like apocalyptic, that kind of thing. So that's sort of like the big thing that people think of when they think of LARPing. The LARPing I sort of do, that I tend towards, is called American Freeform. So that's the title of it currently. Of course, these terms change over time, depending on like, how much these LARP academics fight over these different terms. But the genre that I gear towards is American Freeform, which is basically you're acting, it's like improv, but like you're improving for each other, and the mechanics are like experimental. They're like weird. They're very heavy on like, relationship building and like story, and less so on like the fighting side of things. And also the text that you receive, like for your characters, it's very short. It's like maybe a few sentences, versus, something that's like maybe a black box LARP, or like another type of LARP that has pages and pages, though black box LARPs don't always necessarily have to have pages and pages either. So there's like all these different types of LARP, and I think that when people think about LARPing, it's very limited, even though it's like it's a huge genre.
Yeah, I remember I first heard about LARPing was from the World of Darkness, the Vampire the Masquerade stuff, and that's a completely different, as you say, a genre as boffer swords.
Yeah.
And so was that kind of was that when you wrote The Other Place, as that LARP game, was that an idea you always had in your head, or is that something that you was there ever a point where it was a natural fit to make this into a LARP game instead of, say, like a tabletop game or some version of a board game or anything like that?
Yeah, I think for The Other Place, that was something that I wanted to use, that I wanted to make like out of the stuff that I really liked in art school. So this was basically like me branching out of art school and being like, hey, I want to do this thing. And I sort of miss art school, so I'm going to do this thing. And it wasn't going to, like, the initial thought for that was that it's not going to be published into like, it's not going to go mainstream. It's not going to like be anything big. If anything, it's probably like, like an indie film that like 10 people will see. So that was like the initial intention for that. And somehow, luckily, I got like an honorable mention for that. So I guess that was also like a pushing factor where I was just like, oh, next year I'm going to try to do it again.
It was like the Jim Jarmusch of LARPing then.
Exactly.
And and as you mentioned earlier, that kind of got you started as then, you decided like, you and Herb said, let's kind of make game and a career. And then that plus Yay Diamonds really then suddenly, it's like, as you said, like because you already met a lot of these contacts. throughout those several years ahead before that. So once Yay Diamonds happened, did people come to you, or did that point you kind of switched gears instead of from making buttons to say, hey, let's actively search out collaborators? How did that happen?
I think so this happened in a board game cafe. So I think that's how I met Dave and Brian. So we were at a board game cafe in Hoboken, and I think it was like every week night. It was like a weeknight. I think it was like Wednesday or Thursday or something like that. People would meet up and they would show off their prototypes. And so we became friends with Dave. We became friends with Brian, and we were just like, oh, this is a really interesting game mechanic. Like, why don't we try and put this together and see if it works? So that's where it sort of happened. And then I think we were still not quite ready to publish like 10 games a year or anything like that. So we were just like, okay, what's the next thing that's going to be on our docket? Let's try and publish this game that Herb's been working on forever. Let's do that. That'll be our next game. And then we were focusing on having one game per year, and trying to like make it sort of close to us for now. And then after that, it sort of exploded into like a bunch of people were like pitching us their projects, and we're just like, oh, we're publishers now. We should actually like take pitches. Okay. And so one of the pitches was Battle of the Boy Bands. And Lair. So Lair actually came first, but Tam, the designer for Lair, had been working on this thing for 5 years. We'd been playing this thing for 5 years, and we were just like, eventually, okay, just let us do it. We'll deal with it. We'll publish it, and that way, at least you're published. You have a thing, so that way you can like go out to other publishers and be like, hey, I have a published game. So that's one of the games that we had published after that. The one that we got a pitch for, Battle of the Boy Bands, that was something that came like later on, where we're just like, oh, what's our next move? What are we gonna do next? Like, maybe we should try Kickstarter. Let's see how that looks. And we were hesitant at first because we weren't familiar with it. Even though like I had worked on projects before, I'd worked on different Kickstarters before, but like to fully, get behind the scenes and deal with comments, make the graphics, all of that. We just hadn't been ready until Battle of the Boy Bands hit. And when we found that it was like the perfect match for Kickstarter, because it also hit like a K-pop group type of niche, type of audience. We were just like, okay, let's see what happens. So that was the next game that we did. And for that, I had already been friends with Cleo Youngsu Davis. We've been friends for a while, and they introduced me to Vicky Ho, who is now in New Zealand. So the time zone difference was sort of a challenge trying to get everything together. But eventually we got everything done, and now it's on its way over here. So very excited for that.
Yeah, and that was earlier. That was back in July?
Yes.
June?
Yeah, what are months?
I know. This is the longest 2 weeks I've had for a long. This 2 weeks has gone by for the.
I swear, I thought Halloween had already passed. Apparently not.
Yeah, I think what we're gonna do, because we're not doing trick or treating. I got a 4 and a 6-year-old. I think we're gonna do the Easter egg hunt, but make it trick or treating. We're gonna hide fun-sized candy bars all over the place and have them try to find it.
That's really smart.
Yeah, and then whatever they can't find, I'm just gonna take. So then I can, because I know where they're at. No.
Smart.
So let me ask you: is a game and a curry? Do you have a specific genre of types of games that, like I say, do you have like listed out like it has to fit under this umbrella?
Mm-hmm.
What is that umbrella? That what it would look like?
Yeah, I think initially with our board games, we wanted everything to be accessible. That's the most important thing, and that means like accessibility and price, and accessibility and understanding the mechanics. What we wanted was to have easy rules and easy mechanics for people to understand. And so everything also had to fit within like a small box, hence like why all of our boxes are the same size, except for Jiangshi. That's like a different thing.
Yeah.
But with our board games and card games, they're all in the same size box. And that's pretty much like the one criteria. Like everything has to fit into the same size box, and it also has to be easy to understand for new gamers. And it also has to be like relatively cheap to make. So that way the price, the MSRP can be, you know, at an affordable rate.
So, okay. And do you see it, because as we had mentioned, the sandbox is so small, what level of diplomacy or collaboration is it when there's a pitch that happens? Do you say, we're not the right company for you? Or if you hear about someone who's pitching at another studio and they're like, I really want them. How does that work? Does that happen at all?
So I think, okay, so in terms of like the designer, so I'll speak from a designer's perspective, right?
Yeah.
If you have a game and you're interested in publishing it and you're interested in like pitching to publishers, I would say just like exhaust all the options, right? Like go to every single publisher and just like show it off. There is, I mean, as long as there's no contract involved, there's no paperwork involved, then I think it's okay. Like I wouldn't be upset if you pitched me a game like today and then you pitched the same game to another publisher tomorrow. Like, I don't think that there's like, you know, there's any harm in that. The only, you know, restriction is like once paperwork has been signed, once, you know, money has been handed over, then that's like a legally binding thing. But most publishers, I think, are very understanding, and they're just like, oh, you know, you could pitch it to us, you could pitch it to, you know, the person down the street, maybe not the person down the street, but like, you know, if you want to pitch it to us, if you want to pitch it to like, you know, Smirk and Dagger, that's totally fine. If you like, you know, want to just shop around, that's okay.
Yeah. And has there been a point though, like when you have to like sit on it? There have been opportunities where you just like that you knew right away, like you're going to take it. You probably wouldn't say it to the pitcher right there, but how, I guess my question is, how often do you get the games that are pitched to you, and how often do you have those based off of you hearing about it? How many of the times are you out reaching out to the person, and how many it's vice versa?
I would say most of the time it's us reaching out. So I think most of the time when we publish something, it's us reaching out to a person. When we do get pitches, usually it's not a good fit. And I think that's because what we're looking for is very specific. And it's not necessarily going to fit with like the things that we're looking for at the time. But that doesn't mean that it might not fit somewhere else. So like, you know, if there's like, I can give an example of like a game that we saw a while ago where it used like a massive board and it used like a lot of components. And we were just like, oh, this is like a fun game, but maybe it's not going to be best with us. You know, maybe think about this other company. And, you know, I think a lot of the time with when people pitch games, they're also very like protective of what they have. So I would say like if you're pitching to a publisher, remember that once you sign that game over, it's probably going to be the mechanics that you're selling. And if they retheme the game, it's all up to them. They might retheme it. They might change the artwork. They might change a lot of things.
Right. And so talk to us a bit about the contract piece. Like it's, so what, you know, if we're listening to somebody who says, hey, listen, if you're going to pitch a game to a publisher or a studio, what's some of your advice to the pitchee? Which ones, what would say that if you're going to somebody, what would be some of the things that you would tell them to definitely make sure is in that contract on behalf of both parties?
Gotcha. So so in a contract, you usually want to look out for how much you're getting paid, right? Like, so you want to make sure that piece is there, definitely. Like, usually you would look for a percentage, so you would get royalties, right? And the best would be getting an advance as well. For mass market games, an advance is usually not included, but there's always room to negotiate. I think that a lot of the time, game designers, they forget that they can do that when that's absolutely like open on the table. Like, if there's a conversation going, you might as well ask for a higher royalty rate, or ask for, an advance if there's none on the table. I would say like smaller indie publishers, they're usually more generous with their percentages. But at the same time, when you think about it, they're not going to be publishing, tons and tons of games. They're probably going to be publishing like 1,000 print run, and that's it. Versus like mass market, they're probably, working with like, I don't know, 30,000 games or units or whatever. So that's why they can get away with like a lower percentage.
Yeah. And then what about, so that's as you wear your hat as the one that owns a business. Now flip it for somebody who not freelances, but works for other places. What do you make sure is one of the negotiating techniques? Do you make sure there's Banana Chan as a person, or do you say, hey, I want us to make sure you put the game in a curry logo on the back of this box, or if you want that, making sure that, so how does that work for you as somebody that is a writer for games as well?
Yeah, I would say credit. So making sure that the credit is there. So it could be on the inside of the box, it could be, inside of the book, or on the cover of the book, or on the cover of the box. Making sure that that's there. And also making sure that you understand that basically you're handing over like all the rights to this thing for a period of time. So this period of time could be a year, or 2 years, whatever that period of time is. After that, the rights should revert back to you. So making sure that that goes back to you once the contract is done. If you want to, after that, you can sign it off to another publisher. You don't have to stick to the same publisher if you didn't have a good time with them or something like that. But if you did have a good time with them, you can ask to, renew that contract and like keep working with them and have them, do another print run or something like that. With a second print run, there usually is a higher percentage after the initial print run is out. So look out for that. Some companies do that. More indie companies do that, but like larger companies might not do that. So, that might be in the contract as well. As for other things, I gotta think about this because this is like a lot of stuff as well. But I can get back to you on this eventually. Let me think about this one.
So, and so what is your capacity? Because right now this is your full-time job, right? You don't have.
No.
No, I mean, you have a day job too.
Yeah.
Jeez Louise. Okay. So, what's your capacity? At what point do you take care of Banana? What point do you say, all right, have you had to turn down some really good opportunities just because you've already made commitments to some other points? And then what's your capacity at, and how do you, and that, I read things like time management is fictional, doesn't exist. There's task management is what we do now. So how do you manage what your capacity of how many projects at once can you kind of do?
I would say I would have to gauge it by what the scope is, first of all, the scope and the deadlines, right? So what are the timelines for this project? If it's like a small project with like, a few prompts, I could probably do it. Like I could knock that out in like a couple of days, right? Or like a day or something like that. But usually what I like to do is I like to block time out to do specific tasks. So say for this day, I would be working on, and I'll just like make up a project A. So project A, I would work on from say 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. And then from there, I'll have like lunch or a break or whatever. And then after that, I would have another block of time to work on project B. And then after that, I have a cutoff time. So the cutoff time for me is usually around 6 or 7. And then from there on, it's just like doing things like this, right? Like doing live streams or whatever else, and just like relaxing for the rest of the day.
Now, so I didn't find this in my research, so you can completely say this is not true at all. But have you, since they're on to me in 2016, have you been able to publish any of your own IPs or your own specific games that you've created?
For myself?
For yourself?
No.
Okay.
So I usually don't publish my own. I didn't publish my own work for a while until Jiangshi, which I guess is like the first game that I'm publishing / co-publishing.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And so prior to that, it's a lot of working for other companies doing like, using their IPs. So Scooby-Doo Betrayal at Mystery Mansion was their IP. It was like a mixture of Hasbro and, Avalon Hill and Hanna-Barbera. And, with the Dune license, that was also something through Modiphius. So it was a lot of like working with other companies and working with like other IPs that weren't original to me. By original, I mean like they weren't from me, like they're not something that I produced. But I wrote for them, and basically they were all contract gigs.
Right. So it's more paycheck. Do you have a passion project that you always kind of like look at in the corner? I'm like, I got to get to it, but I got to do this stuff first. Do you have because you're such a creative person, you must have something hidden away that you say one day I'm going to talk about this. So do you have something like that?
Jiangshi was one of them. So that's definitely one of the projects that I've been like, okay. And like Sunful Limb, like we've been working on this thing since like 2018. So for a while we were just like, oh, we have to do something together. Like, let's make a Google Doc and just like throw all of our ideas on it. So this Google Doc still exists. It's still like a living, breathing document. Living, breathing, I guess is like a weird way to frame a document. But anyway, it's like us, we've been like going back and forth on this thing, and we would just like pick out ideas and pick out stuff that we really are passionate about to work on. So the first one was Jiangshi. But after that, we have a few other projects that we're going to get to eventually.
And so you have also you're collaborating with, and I don't know if you wanted to talk about this, is it's launching soon on Kickstarter, Questlings.
Yes.
This looks amazing. Do you want to tell us about this? This looks so fun.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, absolutely. So this is a kids RPG. And it's also for introductory GMs. So if you want to, get into GMing or get into role playing, then this is like a great thing to start off with. So it uses a D6, a D8, and a D20, but the D20 is for the GM. And basically, the game is based off of the series of children's books that Dan had worked on. And Dan worked on it with like a couple of people. So there's going to be, I think, 6 different books. And the role-playing game is accompanying it. And the game itself, it's really easy to run. Basically, you have a whole bunch of prompts, and you're trying to collect 3 inventory items to complete a goal. So you have a larger goal, and you're playing kids, but at some points in the game, you can turn into your inner hero, and your inner hero will help you along the way. And you're playing on a map, and the map has the reality side of things and then the fantasy side of things. And so when things get difficult, like, if there's like a big challenge that's about to happen, you would switch over to your D8 instead of your D6, and you would roll using that, and you would go into the fantasy realm of things using your inner hero to defeat the challenge.
Wow, that looks super fun. And was this one of the examples of what you said earlier about they came to you to collaborate, or you seek them out? How did that work?
So Dan had been chasing me down for a while for another project. And then eventually it was just like, hey, do you want to work on this? And I'm like, absolutely, yes. I will definitely work on this with you. So yeah, it was Dan Lutzering, from Let Him In Games.
Right. Yeah, he's in New York. Yeah. Looks like it's in Rochester, New York area, huh? That's pretty cool.
Yeah. I mean, I say we're close. We're not actually that close. I think we're about like 4 hours away or something like that.
And so this has been, so give us a little bit also, is like, so where can people find you? Where can people and you expand, like, as I say, as you said earlier, I guarantee that there's not much that Banana Chan hasn't been able to, help out with. You're like I always try to put things in like perspective of like the, like a high school scene. Like you're the one like everybody knows in school, like everybody knows that. So where can people find you?
So I'm usually on Twitter. So you can find me at Banana Chan Games on Twitter. You can find my company on Twitter as well at Game and a Curry. Game and a Curry is also on Facebook, and we're pretty active there. Our website, unfortunately, gameandacurry.com, is down for some strange reason, so we're going to have to look and see what's going on there. But it's usually www.gameandacurry.com.
And also too, for any of the viewers out there, if you go to their Facebook page, there is a contest that was in 2013, and I guess they never put a timeline on it. I just thought it was still active, but no, I guess 7 years old is still.
I love that comment too. I was just like, oh yeah, I did forget about that.
Still have that t-shirt, probably all dusty now, probably in a corner someplace.
I mean, I have it somewhere, I'm sure. I can pick one up for you if you want a t-shirt.
It sounds like 50. It's only like 2 likes on this. I'll hit like on it and see if make that 50 mark.
I guess someone's winning that contest. 7 years later. 7 years
later. But thank you very much, Banana. And it's pick one of the games. If you're to come back, it would be great to talk to you about some really good some of the specific projects you're working on coming up. That'd be great too. So I had a great time, and thanks for coming, and thank you for being flexible to your schedule, and congratulations on your Jiangshi. Did I say it right?
Jiangshi.
Jiangshi?
Yeah.
Okay. Congratulations on that. That was already that surpassed your goals and everything there, and that's going to be coming out according to one of your previous interviews. You said it's going to be kind of launching. It'll be out for backers in early Q1 2021, correct?
Yeah. So the digital version should be ready by the end of November, sometime in December. But the physical version should get to us in Q1 2021.
Okay, cool. Yeah, and then you have another one coming up, as we just said, Questlings.
Yeah.
You have also Sea of Legends coming out in 2021. You got, as you just said, the Scooby-Doo one just was released in September, right?
Yeah, that's out in any sort of friendly neighborhood game store. There's that, and I guess like Target, Amazon, those places. I'm not too sure. It's like mass market dealings, underground dealings of mass market stuff.
Yeah, you said you got Dune. You're working on a bit of Dune. You're it's everything. And what I love about, if you ever besides this interview, obviously for the viewers or listeners to this, if you ever just do a search on your podcast app or YouTube, you type in Banana Chan interview, there's always at the end of it someplace where Banana goes, well, I can't talk about this project, but I'm working on another project. And she's always like, well, there's another project. I can't really talk about it right now, but there's another project. And you can actually kind of follow her saying that throughout the months to then pick up which project she couldn't talk about before, then she could talk about now. So
I like how you actually listen to all these podcasts. I can't believe you actually did that. So thank you so much.
All right. Well, and so come back again anytime. I had a great time. So,
Yeah, I love
people,
it.
yeah, okay. As well as the owner of her own publishing company, Game and a Curry, with her partner Herb.
Yes, Herb.
Okay. I felt that. I'll edit this part out. I knew it was Herb, but for some reason I'm reading it, and then I read it as Herb, as in curry, and then it threw me off. So. All right, I'm gonna do this one again. Okay. All right. Welcome to Storycomic Presents, where we interview amazing storytellers and artists. This is episode 42. We're talking with Pajama Chan. All right. I think I'm overthinking this.
Banana and pajamas.